And as I looked at the kids sitting out front, I envied them because I've never been able to sit like that. How many of you can do that? You can cross your legs in front of you like that. I can't do that. I've always wanted to do it. And I always admire people who could. Even him crossing his legs like that. I can't even do that. I have trouble doing that. And I envy people who can do that. So, enough of that. But Merry pre-Christmas to you. I think this is one of the few times it's been during the middle of the week.
Yes.
Is that right?
Well, no, this is the fourth Sunday.
Fourth Sunday.
You're always on the fourth.
Always on the fourth.
Sunday.
So, okay. Does it always come around Wednesday or Thursday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just seems to me that it's Wednesday, and then after Christmas is that Thursday. I guess it's always been like that. When I was growing up, Christmas, of course, was a lot different. I remember the first Christmas present I got was a girl's bicycle, and I got it from the JCs, and I rode it so proudly up and down the street. It didn't matter to me that it didn't have the crossbar in the middle. It did the sync thing. I just knew it was a bicycle, and I enjoyed every bit of it. And I also got a bunny rabbit for Christmas one time. Beautiful black bunny rabbit that the landlord left for me outside in a box. And, of course, I named it Bunny. And I enjoyed that rabbit as long as it finally got away and I guess went off into the woods. But for almost a year, I enjoyed that little rabbit. So I got some pretty special gifts at Christmas time. And it's a beautiful time. I enjoy it. I don't... it's just my personal feeling. I don't have a problem with I guess you could say it can be problematic, some of the commercialism that surrounds it. Some of it, to some degree. It doesn't bother me as much. Maybe it's to some people, because I like seeing the stores light up and the Christmas ornaments and everything hung out, and I like to hear Bing Crosby sing "Dreaming of a White Christmas" and Nat King Cole sing his favorite, and I like to hear Elvis sing about my blue Christmas, and there's another one, he says bring my baby home for Christmas. I like all of that. I enjoy this season of the year, the lights and everything. Okay? So this morning I want to just introduce you to something, talk to you about something that I've increasingly become convinced of as it relates to this issue of time. And we say so many different things about time. I don't have enough time. Time is running out. Don't waste your time. So it is a common part of our discussions with each other and even within. We think about this issue of time. And I want to talk about it in a way that some of us may be familiar with and some of us may not be familiar with, but it's one that I embrace. And it helps this whole process of living and time make sense to me. But I wanted to read this to you first, as I was sitting there and I decided to write it. Oh, may our hearts bleed and voices cry out for untruths we have told ourselves, for joys we have withheld, for pleasures we have forsaken, for peace we have trampled upon, for love we have tossed aside, for that greater, stronger, kinder, wiser part that is an inextricable part of each of us. I think human beings, and it has to do, I think, with the fact that we're very infant-like in terms of our evolution. I think we do a lot of depreciation, if you would, or self-criticism. I think we're very cruel to ourselves and to each other. And I think a lot of our cosmologies and theologies present to us human beings who are somehow broken and not very good and unkind and even vicious and evil. And I think we bought into that, and I think it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. It's almost like when you have children in a classroom, if you're forever telling them what's wrong with them, then they can't sometimes get from under that. They just, well, I'm bad. And I wrote one time on Facebook, I think the original sin was the idea that there is such a thing as sin. And I think we've told ourselves some things about ourselves that are not true, and we've come to believe those things, and we act those things out. And I believe, along with many other people, that it's time for a new paradigm. It's time for human beings to look at themselves differently. And I believe that when we begin to see ourselves differently, we'll begin to behave differently. That's just where I am. I'll tell you a funny story. I Uber part-time, and I went to pick a gentleman up in Waimama yesterday. And he lives way back up in the woods. And I'm trying to think of his name right now. There's a famous country singer. He's named after him. And it'll probably come to me once I sit down. I'm having a senior moment right now. But Waylon. His name is Waylon. Waylon Jennings. And so I picked him up. I finally got to him. I went way back up, dirt road, brushes everywhere, trees falling, that kind of thing. And I said to myself, you should probably just turn around. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go pick this guy up. And I drove out there and I stopped at this area that was kind of a turnaround where you made a right turn. And I called him on the phone and he said, oh, it's nothing but just dirt roads out here in the country. It ain't going to hurt you. Just keep coming. He said, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll just walk to you. So I said, I got out of my SUV and I looked down and I said, he's nowhere near me. So I made that turn and went down that little dip and followed him out. And finally I picked him up. And he got in the SUV and we started talking. And boy, he is the absolute political opposite of me. We started talking and he was telling me what he feels and how this should be done. And I had enough courage, even though he was my passenger, to tell him that I disagreed with some of his stuff. But you know what? As we talked and I listened and he listened, we agreed on some things. And I put on some Waylon Jennings music for him. And I picked Waylon Jennings' greatest hits. And he would, when the songs were, he said, yeah, there you go. That's it. I had to drive him all the way to Sarasota to St. Armand's Key. So it was about an hour's ride. And I said, there's no way you're going to get out of this one, boy, so you might as well make the best of it. And he was talking and I was talking, and then we settled down. And by the time I got into St. Armand's Key, I'd fallen in love with him, in spite of our differences. And I said, Waylon, you have a wonderful Christmas. I said, it was a pleasure meeting you. And I looked back at him, and he smiled and laughed and said, you have a wonderful Christmas, too. And last night, about 10 o'clock, Uber sends you a message when you get a tip. It says, Uber driver, you got a tip. And guess who sent me a real nice tip? It was Waylon. And I shared that with you to say that there's a part of all of us that if we reach for it, we can reach for it. And in spite of our differences, we can find something that makes us common. And I think it's this journey I've taken where I'm falling more and more in love with myself and more in love with humanity. In spite of where we are on the political spectrum, I believe there's an imprint in all of us, and we can reach for that. In Jewish mysticism, it's called that divine glow that you find throughout the universe and in every human being. And I found that with Waylon, and I said, I'd like to pick him up again. And I mean, he really had some different ideas. He was, but I fell in love with him. And I think he enjoyed me. by the time we got to St. Armand's Circle, because he talked about rich people, and he said, boy, them rich people are going to be rich, and poor people are going to be poor. I said, well, you're really going out there where the rich people are on St. Armand's Circle, and he laughed, but we had a good time. And I just wanted to share that with you, that I think we can reach that, what Abraham Lincoln called better angels of our nature, if we reach for them, that we can find that common ground in each of us. So this morning I want to talk about this thing called time. Einstein called it an optical illusion. He said time is not really, it's not a real construction. It's kind of made up thing that we've done as human beings. And he said space and time are a single fabric where events are interconnected and not separated by time. In CWG, Conversations with God, in that family that I'm a part of, we say there's only the eternal moment of now. That the triad of yesterday, today, and tomorrow is a mental construction. It's something we kind of made up, and for a reason. It's a tool that we utilize in order to experience these singularized expressions of our existence as we go through them piece by piece. In ultimate reality, there are no triads. There's no relativity. We exist in the realm of relativity, where something is relative to something else. And in the absence of that which is not, that which is does not exist. What does that mean? That means in the absence of tall, there is no short, and in the absence of big, there is no small. In the absence of up, there is no down. We live in this construction for a reason. Einstein basically said that yesterday, today, and tomorrow are figments of our imagination. And it is not a timeline, this thing we call time, that runs from left to right and from what we consider birth to death, although science tells us that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It takes on different forms. And that energy and matter are basically governed by the same law. You can dissipate it, you can change the form, but you can't destroy it, and it's not created. And we are, even in the physiological sense, we're energy. We are energy. And he said time is not an up and down thing. It's not horizontal. It is not so much that time is passing or moving as it is what the scientists call the space-time continuum, where we're moving through a static field that's called space. And we're the ones that are moving, not that there's time that's passing. But what we are measuring is distances between objects. It is the eternal moment of now that is like leaves of paper stacked on top of each other. It is more like a spindle than something horizontal, where each one of these sheets of paper is an existence that is happening simultaneously. All the paper for all time on that spindle, all events occurring in the present moment of now. No beginning and no end, because the all of everything just is. Consider a CD-ROM. We know, most of us know what a CD-ROM is, right? And let's consider the CD-ROM when it comes to, say, a game of chess or some other competition. And those who played games against the computer understand that all the moves that could be made have already been anticipated. So no matter what move you make, the computer can anticipate it. and occasionally somebody sort of outsmarts the computer. But the universe operates, of course, in a much more meticulous and a much more complicated way, somewhat like a CD-ROM, where all of everything has already occurred and is already anticipated. And what we do in our individuations of time is go through these various experiences, and we choose which trajectory we want to be on that will determine the outcome which has already occurred. And I think I compared it to a 16-millimeter film when I was here before, where the entire movie has already been done, and it's rewound, and you go through it frame by frame. Einstein was suggesting that there is no yesterday, today, and tomorrow, but that all things occur at once, and the only thing we can measure is the distance between these objects. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm not going to be here forever, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that to crystallize it and make it clear to you. We are beings of divine proportions. This is what we believe in the CWG community. Not simply physical entities existing from point A to point B. You've heard of what they call the parallel universe, or parallel universes now they're saying. And I think that this contributes to the notion that there's a whole lot more happening than we might presently see. And that this idea of a spindle versus horizontal might be a much more appropriate framework for our existence. Within the isness is where our experience and the greatest secret of our existence lies. We may move within the isness to any place on the continuum we choose. Now, what does that have to do with? That has to do with this. And I've shared with you all before that I believe that there's only one entity in all of existence, which has individuated itself into zillions of expressions. There's only one thing that is all things. And each and every one of us on this tiny blue dot we call Earth, among trillions of other potential planets and solar systems and galaxies, are individuations of that individuation. And we're inextricably tied together. And within this context, you and I, as much as we may find it difficult to accept, it's just a suggestion, we do not represent all of who and what we are. That we exist, not just here and now, but all over this continuum, everywhere. That's why I mentioned the parallel universe thing. You are just one of you in one time frame, and there may be 1,000,000 of you on this spindle existing in all of these different realms throughout the universe. We're larger than we think we are. We're not just tiny physical beings on an earthly plane, but we're beings of divine proportion. And I'm going to share with you how we can get a peek at what that means. We can not only exist within many frameworks and within many constructions of what we might call time, but we can time travel. And how do you know that? We do it routinely. We do it when we dream. When we dream, that part of us that is not physical travels throughout the universe and beyond. And because we're singularized in this physical realm, it is sometimes difficult for us to remember exactly what that experience was like, or the ether or essence of that part of us that did travel. When we are asleep, that larger metaphysical part of us takes flight. The body rests, but the body is only a part of a triad. We are divine souls with minds and the body. When the body is asleep, that metaphysical part of us travels throughout the universe and beyond. And when we awaken, some of us, we say like, wow, that seems so real. Or it seems like I've been to that place before. We may have some called deja vu. Seems to me that I was there once, and I went again. And because we are beings, and this is a part of why I wrote the part of us crying for humanity or weeping for humanity, because we are so much more magnificent, so much larger, so much infinitesimal than we think we are. We are so much more expansive than the physical entities that we utilize in this realm for certain purposes. The energy that sticks to us like glue. How many of you have ever been to, well, let me put it this way. I know some of us don't want people to know that we've been to see a psychic. Some of us have done that. And we've had the experience where they've said things to us and we go, oh, how did you know that? How could you know that? And they can know it because there are people who develop that psychic ability that all of us have. We're all psychic. You can walk into a room and sense the energy that's in the room. They can pick up residue of some part of us somewhere in the universe and identify it for us. But then this is the thing. They may pick up residue of that part of you that may be on that trajectory, but there may be another part of you on a different one. So the question I would ask the psychic is this, is I know you may have picked up some residue. I also know that is a trajectory and I can change it at any time. So tell me which part of me did you see or sense from the future, because there's more of me than me. And that is so difficult for us to believe. And a lot of it has to do with our cosmologies and theologies that limit us to physical entities in just this place we call Earth. I mentioned deja vu. How many of us have had that experience? And I want to tell you this morning. In the Conversations with God family, we believe that deja vu is something that is a reminder of an experience that you have already had and you may be having again. It was all created at once, and all of it exists right now. Everything. Because the one thing that is all things created it. And it just is. Let me go further. We're all aspects of being with consciousness of the whole embedded within us. And you know what I say to people all the time? I say, when you drive on the highway, people act just like children. I mean, we drive real close to each other, and so it's almost as though we're drawn to each other, and then we are repelled at the same time. We're drawn together and repelled simultaneously. And I think within each of us, there's a kind of guidance system that we sense at a higher level makes us one. I think we all know we're one, even though sometimes from a mental perspective, we can't grasp it, because the mind collects data and reacts. The body experiences, the soul, which is that metaphysical part of us, the larger part of us, it observes and knows. That is why you hear the expression go within or go without, because it is that larger part of us that puts things really in perspective. Our minds observe and react. They are not configured to make sense of all of the phenomena that we experience in this realm. There's only as much of it as it is capable of integrating. There's only so much of it. There's a larger part of us that can do more. And one of the things that we believe, and it's because of our limited mental constructions capability, is that somehow we live in a world where there's evil, and we make big mistakes, and we're bad people, and they're good people. And quite frankly, depending on a person's model of the world, any and everything they do is, as far as they're concerned, quite okay. And what we are encountering is people who have different ideas about life, which is one of the experiences I had the other day in the car with Waylon. But I found a way to connect with him beyond that, because we don't all agree. In fact, there was a great statesman who said, if you agree with everything I say, your head needs to be examined. If you agree with some of what I say, and that's good, but not everything I say, then you might need to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because we differ. But because we're different doesn't mean we cannot be civil with one another and live together in spite of that and make the best of the situation, because ultimately it's not a matter even of what's right and wrong, because that's a moving feast, and what you see as right I may say is wrong, and what you see as wrong I may say is right. But we can ask this question: what serves us as a community? What serves us as a species? What will bring the best, the greatest outcome for all of us? That is not an ethical question. That is a question of survival. That is a question of harmonious living together. What serves us? And then we don't have to have all these fights about whether you should burn people at the stake, or you should chop their hands off, or put them in prison, in cages forever, because there are 1,000 different perspectives on what is good and what is just, but what serves us as a species is pretty direct. And then we say all of these imperfections exist. But let me ask you this: is a tree any less perfect because it's a seed? The perfection of that tree is in the seed. Is a baby any less perfected because it cannot do certain things or does not know certain things? That baby is just as beautiful and perfect when it is born into the world as it is as it grows and evolves and develops. We are seedlings who are growing and experiencing life. And we place labels on it, which is what we're here to do. We decide what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. We do it all the time. But we are evolving, and we're changing our ideas about that. We are perfect in the process of evolving. We are not imperfect. We're not evil. We are evolving. And as we evolve, we change our perceptions and our ideas. And it's interesting that the evil person is always someone other than us. But when we begin to see that the seedling is just as perfect as the tree, although it has to grow, it has to evolve, and human beings are evolving very slowly. But we are evolving. We make up the rules as we go. We have imagined our boundless selves to be limited, and we've done that for a reason. In order to know ourselves and our own experiences in this particular one, this limited one, we have this limited perception of time. We have come into this process with a kind of voluntary amnesia to experience it like 16-millimeter film again, piece by piece. And we're doing it all over the universe. There's more than you and I in our present physical form. There's more versions of us. There may be a gazillion versions of us in a gazillion different places. That which is boundless is limitless. It is limitless. It is nowhere in particular. It is everywhere. And we are everywhere. We're all over the place. We're not just here. And this image we see in the mirror is not all there is to us. It is what we are experiencing in this particular unit of life, of existence, at this particular location, but we're located everywhere. Our source is incapable of being in one place and not another. And I shared with you all before that all things are the one thing. There's only one of us, and we're all expressions of that one entity, whether we want to call it the cosmic essence, or we want to call it Bob, or Jane, or Jerry, or Sue, or God, or Yahweh, or Jehovah. It does not matter, because what is responsible for our existence in a cause and effect universe is the cause, no matter what we call it. And it is in and through all of us. It is boundless, and so are we. Let me move to this part. Parable of the rock. There's something called the parable of the rock, where an observer is looking from a macro perspective at this rock. How many of you have ever used a microscope? Use a microscope. And when you look at a microscope, you're amazed at some of the things you see. I didn't know all that was going on. All that was going on with this tiny little thing right here. And the observer from the macro perspective says hello to the rock. And the rock says hello. And the macro observer says, wow. From up here, you're just one thing. You're just one integrated thing. And the rock says, yeah, but I have many moving parts. There's a whole lot going on in this rock. And so the observer moves closer and it says, oh yeah, wow, all this stuff is going on. And it's all happening when? At once. But the microorganisms that are in that rock think that they're happening at different times. But they're all happening at one time. And from the micro perspective, it is difficult to grasp that. We are in the micro. The Apostle Paul used the expression, we see through a glass darkly. Our view has been dimmed for a reason. in order that we might experience individually the individuated sequence of our experience now, because the data for the whole picture would be too much for us to ingest. So we have broken it into pieces. We have taken this sandwich called life and cut it into 1,000 pieces that we might enjoy and savor every piece of it. But because we are in a singular expression of existence does not mean that that is all there is. It means that is all that we're experiencing consciously right now. And somewhere else on that spindle, somewhere else in ultimate reality, we're experiencing ourselves expressed in a different manifestation also, simultaneously. Einstein said this. He said, "I have come to believe that it is not time that is passing, but it is I who is passing through time." And let me just do this. There's a lot to absorb, I know. He was saying that time is not a movement, but a field through which we move. Time is not passing. We're passing through this static field we call space. We've decided that 365 days equals a year. But what is a year? We say the earth spins and revolves around the sun. We use the sun as a reference point for that 365, arbitrarily. And we say when we face the sun and don't face the sun, is a matter of us rotating on our axis in a 24-hour period. That was also arbitrarily decided. Well, what's an hour? We say, well, 60 minutes. Well, what's 60 minutes? We say 60 minutes is a collection of 60 seconds times 10. Arbitrary. We just decided that. Why not 10 or 73? Hours and minutes. It was chosen by us. Then we noticed that the earth was not just spinning, but flying. And so we decided we would create months and weeks and days. 365 days into 12 months. But we discovered after that you can't evenly divide 365 into 12, so some months have to have more days than others. And so we solved that little dilemma. And then we discovered that there was a buildup of time. And guess where leap year came from? And we lived by that construction. We laughed about it, so we just add a day. All these things are arbitrary. Just as arbitrarily, we created decades and so-called centuries based on tens rather than 12s. We've in actuality been devising a way not to measure time, but to measure movements through this static space. It is not time which passes, but objects which pass through and move around in a space-time continuum. It is a static field we call space. Dr. Einstein and others realized that time is a mental construction, a relational construction. Time is what it is in relationship to the distance between objects. If the universe is expanding, and it is, it takes longer for it to revolve around the sun, the earth, than it did 1 billion years ago. There's more space to cover. To compensate for a universe that won't sit still, clocks are adjusted every year or so. This is called what? Greenwich Mean Time. Einstein's general theory of relativity helped us understand the correlation between time and space. The further you go, the more you warp the space-time continuum. They also discovered that. Example, if we could travel far enough into space and return around 10 years, we would discover that the earth dwellers or people on earth had aged about 30 years. If we find a way to propel ourselves faster, we could cheat the universe. And so the 10 years would be 10 minutes on earth. They've also discovered what we call these folds in the universe, which could fling us back in time. Yes, we could travel in time. And we would see that everything is happening at once. We would discover the eternal moment of now. This is discussed in more detail in the book called Conversations with God 2. But my point is this. We have constructed many things that are based in relativity, but do not apply in ultimate reality. And we do that so that we might conveniently navigate this physical realm. We think, based on much of our arbitrary addition and subtraction and contractions and extractions, rather, that it is one way, when in actual reality it could be something totally different. Why is there no such thing as time? Because time is a tool that we use to navigate the physical realm that is not based on something that is moving outside of us, but something within which we are moving. Einstein also said this, and I'll be seated. He said if we could build a rocket fast enough to take off from the earth out into space, fast and far enough, we could turn around and see ourselves taking off. And what does that mean? That means, like Shakespeare said, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophies. Time is something we created. And we're discovering now that our universe won't behave. It will not fall within the constraints of our conception of time. And that what is actually happening is that we simply do not have the tools yet to see that everything is happening at once. And that there's only the preset or present moment. And so someone might say, does that mean we're predestined? Not with a gazillion possibilities and choices. And we get to choose those. We have the freedom to choose. There's more of you than you see in the mirror. And there's more to life than the limited physical expressions that we occupy within this frame. There are other frames because we're beings of divine proportion. We're not restricted by time or anything. It's a construction we use to navigate this realm. There is much, much more to you than you could hardly ever conceive of.